let's kick it over to our head referee, Nick.
This is the Sports Startup Digital Debate Competition, and we are part one for the Esports in Gaming round. Today, we're joined with two amazing founders, Marc Rowley, the founder of Live CGI, and Aaron Fletcher, the founder of Repeat. They're going to be debating head-to-head, and we're going to start it off with a coin flip decides who receives the question first. So, Marc, would you like heads or tails?
Tails.
Tails. It is heads. So, Aaron, would you like to receive the question or would you like to defer?
I'll go first. It's fine.
Amazing. So, when I ask the question, you guys will have 30 seconds to respond each. After your answer, then the other opponent will be able to counter that question. Does that sound fair with you all?
Sounds good.
All right, let's get it on. Cool. So for the first question, how can startups remain authentic to esports and gaming culture while scaling into larger corporate entities?
So with culture is a very kind of touchy subject, especially throughout gaming. And I think one of the biggest things with culture is it's not being authentic to esports or gaming. One, they're two very different industries, gaming versus esports, but it's being authentic to your audience. So regardless of how you're going to do it, any whatever way, you need to know your audience. You effectively, if you're a startup, you have to hope and you're funded, you have market fit. If you've got market fit, you should essentially know your audience and your messaging should portray that. So as an example, mobile, majority of those users are female. So female centric for those games that they're playing. So your audience and your message and your culture needs to be very different. To if you're building a hardcore esports product that's competitive, your culture needs to be kind of portrayed towards that. So you need to make sure that your advertising, your messaging, that everything like that goes out is the right message for that audience.
And I think from my perspective, you got to look at it as esports and gaming are not the exact same thing. And that's the authenticity that you talk about. If you're going after esports, it's competition. If you're going after gaming, you're gaming for fun, relaxation, all kinds of things. You can be competitive in gaming, but esports is really about that core competition, about the storytelling of who's playing what, where, when. And I think that's key. What Aaron just talked about, knowing your market. If you don't know your market, you're sunk. It doesn't matter if you think you have a good story or not. If you're not actually hitting the target people, it's not worth your time. So I would say if you're going to think about it and you're trying to figure it out, you've already missed a part of it. Go back in and focus on before you get in there, because anyone in esports is going to want to be talked to and want to be communicated with and be shared with in a way that's authentic. If they find you're selling out in a way that doesn't work, they're going to bail on you.
Yeah, I agree with all of those points. Like, I think it's making sure that you hit your target, and then along those lines, make sure that you get that message right. So the different users, the different segments, and if you want to target another market, that message changes, that story changes, everything that you're talking about changes. So you need to make sure that you hone in on who the hell you're talking to. Talk to your audience, because you may not even know at the end of the day, your audience, you may think it's something very different to what it actually is. And there's so many products out there where that's happened. So if that story changes and that audience has changed, change your message, change your product, change whatever needs to be done. Listen to them.
Yeah, or you can ignore it and you can simply say, that's a market I'm not going to go into. And that's a hard decision to make. Is, okay, the story's changed, but I just don't feel a market there. We have people approaching us about medical stuff right now that have been going on. I'm like, it's not our market. We're going to have to stay away from it right now because we just don't have the capacity to scale up. And that's just the nature of business sometimes.
I think it's also I do think that is the nature of business, but if you've got opportunities there and you've got investors, you've got these other people there that you've got to adhere to, and a big opportunity does come along, you still need to kind of focus on those points. So yes, and I agree, you need to stay to your core values, because if you're building a product you hate, why the hell are you doing it anymore? And it's not a market you want to do. But if there's opportunities there that you can make these minute edits, or you can go raise some more funding, because these big opportunities come up and you're like, shit, we need to tackle this. Let's go get the stuff that we need so that we can still focus on our core product, but we can still create a team that can build towards that market where we know there's revenue. We know they want to pay us. We know they're there.
Yeah, my only concern there is I don't want to go after something and kill myself in the process and lose my scope. So that's the only difference. Sorry, Nick.
Next question on that from the revenue standpoint. So what is the biggest source of revenue, B2B or direct to consumer? And why?
I'll let you go first, Marc.
It depends on your product, and it depends on where you're going to go. From our business right now, that's a question we have, because we're aiming B2B, building stuff up, and the B2B is growing, but we're having a lot of consumers that are saying, hey, we want access to this. So now we're sitting in a position where, like, hey, this is software. We've eliminated a lot of hardware. do we unlock that? And it's two different business models about how do you support it. And we looked at how do we manage it. And I think right now we're staying B2C because we see B2B, that's the biggest growth. But the B2C is out there, but that's again where I look at focus is what I've seen kill a lot of startups. Oh, there's another thing here. There's a whack-a-mole. This is a good idea. This is a good idea. Good idea. Stop. Make sure you're hitting your core. And as you're hitting your core, then you can pipe something out. So right now we're at that point where we see the exponential growth and we see multiple exponential growth going. And we're like, hey, maybe we could go to B2C, but now let's stay to B2B because I think in esports right now, the B2C market's been hit a bit. And I want to go B2B so we can actually keep growing on it and have brands get in there because there are brands dying to get in. People are stuck. They're watching content. They want more content. Let's do that B2B model because that's the biggest growth for us in esports.
Yeah, I think it's a mix between the two depending on your product. So if you have a product there that purely is focused on B2B, there is no B2C. It doesn't exist. I think the biggest kind of market is working between the both. So B2B2C. So I think that is where the biggest opportunity is. You work with these brands, you sell to them, that this huge audience that you're building through this B2C model. And if you can do that, you can tackle both sides of the market relatively quickly, earning large revenues from both sides. The brands help you by one, fueling your marketing budgets. They also help you for giving you validation to the customer base. So like, shit, you're working with Uber? Oh shit, this product is something I should look at. Or you're working with an influencer and they're like, oh shit, they bought on FaZe Clan. They're a big influencer or a big team. And they're like, that makes sense. Let's do that. And I think you leverage that B2B relationships you have to make your B2C absolutely grow. That need you're talking about, Mark, is definitely there. And I think it's because brands are using your product and they're like, shit, okay, B2C, B2B. I think at the end of the day, it's you leverage them to get to the end goal. And I think for us, I think the profits in the end are going to be B2C, but I think the profits for us initially are going to be driving for the B2B. And I think it comes down to if you build a good product, you've got market fit, you've got all these sort of things, and you build that B2C, eventually you can monetize that massive user base you built through those brands, that messaging, that authenticity, all those sort of things that you built with them and relationships. I think that.
Yeah, I'm not turning down those markets. I'm not turning them down. I'm just simply talking about the timing and the sequence. And it's like, look, I get it. I see there's another market there, but back to your question, Nick. Right now, our biggest growth from our perspective is that B2B, and then we'll hit that B2C. But I agree, Aaron, with saying, like, let's build a base, and then you can grow anything out of that if you want.
Yeah, I think it really depends on a product, right? So you have a different base for a different product. So if you can't really sell, like, I don't know, chewing gum to businesses as much. Like you can, I guess, you can go to Google and they can sell it to all their employees, but it's probably not going to be as profitable as being a consumer in every retail store across the world. And I think it's if you've got a product that fits that kind of market, then you use it. If you don't, then you push towards B2B, and I think you leverage that to build that consumer side of things. Because I think you have a look at Salesforce, you have a look at these big companies, Oracle, all of them, they have done both. They do have their B2B as their core that builds on that, but they get their noise out there. The reason that everyone knows about these companies and everything like that from a B2C standpoint or in their business life is because they heard about it somewhere else. And I think that leveraging that is a big kind of deal.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. So, with the gaming landscape filled with large organizations controlling the majority of the IP and data, what business approach do you think will win for startups? Either trying to be a tool that supports larger platforms or finding a niche and build your own platform?
So I think there's two different types of IP, and I think we've gone through this at some other point there, where there's technical IP and then there's IP on their actual product. So they have characters, they have all these sort of things within gaming and esports. And I think technical IP, I don't think, in terms of from a software standpoint, it isn't as powerful. It hasn't always been to a degree. If you've got hardware patents, you got shit around that's amazing. But the problem with a software patent, especially if you're a startup, there's not so much you can do with that. You'll only be able to defend it as much as you can afford to pay to defend it. So if you have a lot of money and you have a lot of capital, sure, go down that route. But it's much better to be remaining a trade secret if you're building this software out, this technology out. And then you can keep it in-house. If you're doing something truly unique, they won't be able to replicate anyway. But from a consumer standpoint, I think you need to make sure that you act within the bounds on these other companies. So don't screw with their characters, don't screw with their logo, don't screw with that, don't mess up the shit that they've spent millions upon millions upon billions building these massive brands and these characters and their assets. Don't screw that up. Work with them. And I think from a business standpoint, it's both. So it comes down to scales. So if you want to build a small company, 50 million, 100 million, yeah, you can probably focus on one of the two niches. But if you want to build a big company, $1 billion, all those sort of things, you need to focus on both. You need to sit within basically helping and working with the companies, and then building this niche, as well as then going as big as you can and building tools that help them. And I mean, that's what we're kind of focused on with what we're building.
Yeah, and I think for us, we're technical IP, and it might be sound bad, but we are the software IP that you talked about, Aaron. But you can defend your patents, and we got one that just got approved last week, in a way that even though people are out there doing it, you can send cease and desist. You can go down there without spending a lot of money, and you can look at it and they can look and say, well, are we worth acquiring them, or what are the options? Like, there's multiple things you can do. And the biggest mistake I heard people starting initially was don't patent your stuff. Don't do it. Just go out and build it. And I think that's the biggest mistake you can make. If it's worth it, it shouldn't cost you much to do a patent, a couple grand, and just call it a day. And if you're spending $100,000 on a patent, you're wasting your time. But so procuring your IP is good. And I think back to the question you talked about IP related to marks, logos, creators. Yes, work with them. Don't fight them. It makes no sense. So to your question, Nick, I'd say something niche in the platform will grow and create an opportunity. But if you really want to create $1 billion opportunity, then you're going to have to fight somebody. And sorry, it is what it is. You're going to have to get in there and slug it out. And people talk about, well, YouTube fought all these people at a certain point in time, and now it's a great marriage. It is, but it is because they're willing to fight. And they're willing to build a platform that, started as user-generated content. Now all those brands are on it. So if you're going to go out there, you got to be willing to play a little bit on both sides, make it nice with everyone at first. But then if you really want to build growth, you're going to have to take someone on, and it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to fight. You're going to get in there. But if you believe you have something, go fight for yourself. So I would say start with a niche and then grow. But if you go out and you've raised $1 million and you're going to try and draw a mustache on Mickey Mouse, that's a pretty bad idea. Don't fight that way.
The only problem I have is, yes, you can go fight them and you can fight other startups and you can fight that, but trying to fight a company that owns the game and you're in the gaming industry, you're pretty much screwed. Because if they own the game, they own the IP, you're not going to go and rebuild their game. And I think I agree, fighting with other startups there to be able to take what you can and grow. But I'm of the belief of, esports is huge. I don't know why the hell half of us are even fighting about anything, because competitors do not kill your companies. Market fit and foundership issues are the two things that kill your company. Over 60% of companies die from that. Whereas only 2% or 3% of companies die from competition, and it's Amazon acquiring you. It's not them doing something nefarious. It's they kills you by acquiring you. And I think that is the core thing is, I think it comes down to co-opetition with esports. It's still new. It's still everyone's learning shit. Most people don't even understand how to monetize the industry. So if you work together and you build this pie as big as possible, and shit, let's fight over that pie later. Let's do that. But I think if you're a startup and you're focusing on your competition too much, you probably already fucked up. At an early stage, and you're looking at every news feed, and you're like, oh my god, I'm worrying about they're launching this product. It's so much better than ours. That feature. Who gives a shit? Build your user base, build your core, make everyone happy. Those users, those everything like that, and have them talking about you. It's much better than that little feature of that button that they did better.
All right, and that's the 10-minute mark right there. So great answers, but we got a surprise. We got an overtime question. Are you guys ready for that?
All good.
All right. So the future of gaming industry is most likely consists of ton new exciting technology. Some are split between how virtual reality will play. What's your opinion? Do you think virtual reality become a dominant tech or more of a side option in the space?
So I was a big believer in virtual reality was nominated for an Emmy in virtual reality storytelling 2014, 2013, somewhere in that range. And it's cool, but there's a hardware gap, right? And people have to get through the hardware gap. And in AR, there's 3 billion phones that can already do AR. So back to the point that Aaron was making earlier, why are you fighting this battle? I love VR, I love VR, I love VR. Great, but it's not in the people's hands. Go where the market is. Go with the AR function, because that's where it's going to be. I think virtual reality and gaming, you've got to start thinking about things like, how do people's eyes process? How do their eyes track? How many people can actually see depth? There's a lot of that functionality that come into play. How much am I flashing the images back at them? Just the hardcore software to build it. We just watched a lot of money get dumped into Magic Leap because they believe they could do all this stuff and create this market. And there's 100 startups, 200, 300 startups that could have been funded if the VCs would have just spread the money around a little more. And you could have had a better shot. It's diversified investing. But with Magic Leap, people just poured money in because we thought it was going to work. It's the same with VR. Stop doing that. Put some good bets out there and you're going to see it grow, because you're going to see pieces that'll hit. And when I think about VR and gaming, there's so many times I've watched people spin their head around and fall over in a chair, that it's about the storytelling. If you can figure out how to keep people focused, couch VR is still the best VR out there. because it allows people to calmly sit where they're going. And if you want to play it in Peoria, Illinois, if you want to play it in somewhere in Malaysia where someone can just get it and get access to it, there's still a lot of bandwidth and hardware issues. So VR to me, it will grow. And I'm a big believer, but not right now. I'd focus on AR first.
Yeah, I've been doing VR for a long time. I remember I was very young, in like 1995, and I remember going to an arcade. There's this big, gigantic machine. You throw a headset on. Honestly, nothing's really changed as much. I then also did a thesis in 2003 for one of my college applications or college projects there, where we built out VR, and you were doing feelings and emotions. And yes, it's amazing. People feel very different things, but the problem with it is the thing that drives technology in the gaming industry especially is competition. So you have a look throughout history, every single video game that is huge. You've got Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, World of Warcraft. Literally every game that is big has a competitive element. And the problem with that is they've done studies on it that games are much larger, nearly 5x, if they have a competitive element. They have a much larger user base, they have much larger lifetime, return value, all these sort of things. Without that, you then have a content engine, which is a problem. You can't think of content and bring that out on a weekly basis whereas a competitive element, it builds that content for you. And I think that's the biggest thing that's lacking in VR, because if I'm going to go play League of Legends and I'm in the top 5% or top 1%, I'm the top 100,000 people in the world out of 100 million, or the top 1,000 people out of 100 million, which is huge, which is momentous. And you can build stories and you can do cool shit around it. With VR, you're basically against 10,000 other guys that are sitting in their living room, and if you're in the top 10 out of 10,000 people, there's nothing that's exciting because it isn't accessible. So I think in 10 years time, VR is going to be huge for gaming, but I think it's probably even longer. I'd probably even say 20 years, because the technology needs to get cheap enough to get in everyone's hand. And I agree, AR is going to be huge. I think AR is where you're going to see a lot of things grow. I think VR in the next 10 years is going to work for spaces and for B2B. If I'm in the East Coast and I want to sell to the West Coast and I want to sell my product, or I'm doing architecture, I'm doing landscape, VR is an amazing tool to be able to sell and to be able to utilize that.
There's one last point. VR has a big problem right now. You got to wipe that thing clean. If you're going to do B2B, change the people, like seriously, we're in a different world, man. Things change. That to me is why I look at VR like, hey, VR to consumer, walk into a store, try VR. Ain't no one going to want to try that on right now. Like that nuked a large part of the industry that people aren't even processing right now. You're going to go to a VR cafe. Am I going to want to try that on? I don't know what that person's done. Like, there's a whole big dynamic range that just really shifting beneath us, where AR is fine because you can hold it there. So
I agree. I think that's actually going to be affecting a lot of industries, because I think it's the psychology behind it. And I don't think everyone's like, yeah, we'll have a vaccine in however long. It could be 12 months, whatever. It's irrelevant, completely irrelevant, because people's psychologies over the next 6 months are going to be led to not wanting to pick that up and not wanting to go to a stadium, not wanting to go do these sort of things. And that long-term effects are going to be definitely there, especially with, as you're saying, the VR headsets. But I don't think it just limits to that. I think it's any technology. Like touchscreens are the big one. They're trying to figure out how the hell do we change a touchscreen in every store that's out there, because shit, we can't do that. So that's a whole nother question. But yeah.
But it's an opportunity.
Yeah, it is. I agree.
All right, gentlemen, well, that's all the time we have. Great debate. For all those listening in, give us a hashtag debate for COVID. Let us know who you think won that debate. Thank you so much for your time, and we're going to be on to the next debate after this one.
And let's introduce our judges. First up, Joey Brander, President and Managing Partner at First Serve Partners. Next, Mike Cotton, Co-Managing Director of Wonder Gaming. And last but not least, Jose Vieitez, Co-Founder and Director at Boomtown Accelerators. Let's kick it over to our head referee, Nick.
All right, well, that was a great debate for the esports and gaming category, and now for the judges' votes. We'll start with you, Joey. Could you please provide some analysis and your vote on this section?
Sure. No, and I want to congratulate both of our participants. I think they both did a phenomenal job breaking down their thoughts, perspective, thesis, ideas related to the industry and everything happening within it. I am going to have to cast my vote for Aaron. I think the way that he started out breaking down, one, the fact that esports and gaming are two very different industries with very different consumer bases, and cultures within them. And it's important to understand your particular consumer base and how to be authentic for the demographics and the cultures that you're looking to reach, as well as his focus throughout the debate on the fact that esports especially is still growing and adapting and changing. And many of the major players within it are still trying to figure out how to monetize their businesses and their products. And as a result, it's important for early stage companies in the space to use the advantage they have being early stage, which is being able to be nimble, to be adaptable, to run lean, to pivot if necessary as the industry evolves, and find other verticals or revenue streams or paths to monetization as things develop around them. So I think that Aaron's, the points that he made related to those things were spot on. Mark as well, I think for the AR and VR question was certainly in his wheelhouse, and with the production expertise that he has, that was apparent. But gonna have to cast my vote for Aaron, but congrats to both of these guys. It was a great debate.
Thank you for that insight, Joey. That was very helpful. We'll go to you, Jose, for your analysis and vote.
Yeah, I think Aaron came out of the gate strong. He set the pace for the rest of the debate. He just had a good first round answer, and you saw Mark kind of having to play rebound to a lot of his answers in the beginning. And though he had good points, he had good insights. Often, though, they were a bit overshadowed just because he was going second on some of those. When he did come up with starting off with his answers, they were strong. And yet I saw that Aaron was able to still provide really good insights. So I saw Aaron being able to take a rebound answer a lot stronger than Mark was, even if they had good points. Mark was a bit taken off when he was going second, kind of off footing there. Aaron was really good at playing the politician in a sense of kind of readjusting the questions. For example, when you asked B2B versus B2C, he said, it's B2B to C. This is actually what I believe. So he kind of recreated the questions a bit and yet stayed on topic, which allowed them to be really interesting as opposed to dodging of a question. So I think because of that, Aaron is my vote.
Thank you for that insight, Jose. And that makes sense that Aaron will win 2 out of the 3 votes that we'll put into the next round. Before we do that, I also want to get Mike's insight and analysis on that as well. So, Mike, if you don't mind kind of providing any commentary or takeaways that you might have.
Sure, and I'd like to echo the sentiment of the other judges. I thought they both did a great job. I think Jose hit the nail on the head in terms of Aaron really being the aggressor. And I mean, part of that dynamic was he came out of the gate so strong. And I do totally agree that Mark was almost playing catch up from that point. Like I sort of had a few notes. Aaron's note about audience and market fit being crucial to the authenticity issue was 100% correct. And that's the biggest mistake I see in this space is that brands ineffectively identify core values and market identification. It depends on the brand you're going after and the target market that you're trying to convert into sales. And I thought Aaron did a really nice job of sort of encapsulating that. Jose already covered this, so I won't spend too much time, but I love the way he pivoted the revenue question from B2B to C, which is also where I agree you find the most success. Validating the customer base, I think, is the key to leveraging B2B. And what he intimated, he didn't say it explicitly, is that what you're trying to do is engender FOMO among large brands. And I think he sort of correctly identified that B2B is the entrant point of least friction, but B2C is where you get the higher ceiling from a revenue standpoint and scalability. So, I don't want to downplay. Mark did actually make some great points, but I think Aaron sort of did the best in terms of how he messaged that. A business approach, obviously, like Aaron talked about technical IP having been proven to not work. We saw from 2016 to 18, a lot of investors were hemorrhaging cash into the space, thinking it was an arm race for franchises and technical IP. And we saw a lot of businesses where really mediocre patents were propping up valuations. So you're getting 15 to 20x revenue on investment, which is insane. And the industry has gotten wise to that. And I think Aaron did a great job of laying that out in the sort of business approach section. And then lastly, I mean, VR, I thought Mark actually did really great. That was sort of where I thought he sort of mounted a bit of a comeback. He's correct that the hardware getting into the consumer's hands presents a big challenge because, of course, you just have that sort of gap where if you can't get it in the hands of consumers, you're just never going to be able to scale it. And it's sort of the other part they didn't talk about was it's not conducive to driving live events, which I realize may be parked now because of COVID for 12 months. But when you have these franchise models and billionaires that own the league and they drive a lot of the investment, especially as it relates to tech, they're investing their dollars in AR because they don't want to cannibalize their core business, which by the third quarter of 2021 is going to be how the hell do we fill these arenas again? So, Aaron talked about accessibility being a big issue, and I do agree that tech costs sort of need to come down for VR to the point where it can be mass produced and placed in everyone's hands. But I thought that was Mark's strongest section. But overall, I thought Aaron was the stronger contestant, and my vote goes to him.
Well, thanks for that insight, and congratulations, Aaron, Fletcher. You're on to the Elite Eight. Best of luck to you, Marc Rowley. Thank you for a hard-fought battle in the debate. And Joey, Mike, and Jose, great insight. Hopefully that helped a lot of people understand the industry of esports and gaming. So thank you for that, and we're on to the next round of the Sweet 16.